there's a difference between designating a space where media can be on our campus and inviting them to come to campus.
They're on our campus.
We can't,
We can't say you can't come on campus.
and and that is what I've asked. I have asked to know what the restriction the district can place on media. That is what I've asked, right? So I'm still waiting on that answer. If they cannot step foot on the campus grounds, whatever our legal designation of property is, but they can be on the sidewalk that's city right-of-way, then that's where they could be. I am not in favor of giving the media access to students. I just said that. I referenced what happened at Paxton. So please don't misinterpret and then put out there that I have said I want to invite media onto campus to cover student activity like this.
Well, you
What?
said designated media, a place for the media.
Yes, if we cannot prevent them from being on campus wholesale, then I think that we can designate a place far away from students where they can be. But if we can say media cannot step foot on our campus, which I don't know that we, in the big picture, necessarily want to say, because sometimes they come on to report great things that are happening on our campuses. So we really want to think about the long-term consequences or unintended consequences of that. I'm still talking. When we talk about interrupting the operation of schools, I love a compare and contrast between what we're talking about with student expression.
We can go back and research the media aspect, but I don't think the media has carte blanche rights to just come onto our property, start filming, go up to a fence. I don't believe, I would bet a good amount of my own hard-earned money that they don't have that right just to be able to come carte blanche just because they're the media. Now, as board member Pearson had mentioned in one of her comments, the sidewalk, for the media to be on a public sidewalk or a public right-of-way, sure, they have that right. But to just come on and then assert a certain right where the principal may be saying, no, you've got no business here right now, that, you have to go on the sidewalk or you can't be on our property. I believe the principals would be well within their rights to do that. As far as and if I may, as far as the...
Thank you. I'd be loath to indict the media. I think they've been overall really respectful and requesting access. But I would encourage the addition of the administration in helping to determine the place, duration, manner that they are to ensure student privacy.
As far as the parental notification consent, the Student Bill of Rights, I believe, here in Florida, would definitely support, if the board so chose, would support a provision regarding parental notification. I feel that would be very defensible, right? Parental consent then starts getting into the area that board member Blunt had spoken about, then, because each individual, each citizen has the First Amendment right. It's not a parent that by proxy, so to speak, has the First Amendment right over the child. So I think a parental consent provision may be a little more, maybe problematic compared to parental notification. I don't think there's any case law dealing specifically with consent, so it would be a matter of first impression if you were to put a parental consent provision in the policy, and if we were to get sued on that. So those are a couple, those are ifs, right? I don't think there's any case law on that specifically, but we'll definitely look.
I think what the board member is saying in this next clip is that whatever the board decides has to be viewpoint neutral.
when we talk about interrupting the operation of schools, I love a compare and contrast between what we're talking about with student expression and LifeWise Academy. Because that is something that interrupts the operation of the school. Someone has to check out. Well, first of all, the principal has to designate a time when that student can be off campus. And then someone has to check the student out and check the student back in. And if the student is late, that tardy student interrupts what's going on in the rest of the class to be let back into class. So I'd love a compare and contrast of how one is a disruption to instructional time, but the other is not. Because I think I would flip them and say one is more of a disruption than the other. But both are in that First Amendment realm. You know, you have petition, assembly, press, religion, and speech in the First Amendment. So they're kind of living in that same, I call it papers is how I remember, that same papers.
But
pool.
likewise, there's a state statute that says that we have to allow that.
Right, so the state maybe is picking and choosing what's a disruption and what's not a disruption, because the things that I've cited could easily be interpreted and experienced as a disruption to the operation of the school. When the principal has to look at student schedules to designate a time, when the office people who are busy doing other things have to check students out, check students in, and if a student is a minute late coming back and has to be let in, because all our doors are locked, so they're not traveling with the class, they have to be let in, the teacher, it disrupts what the teacher's doing in the class to let one or more students back in however many times in a week they have students going. So
Ms. Sands,
I don't
you
think
wanted to
that's a
make
stretch.
comment?
I just wanted to add something I think might be useful. I think maybe one clarification we should provide is disruption. What does that look like from a First Amendment context versus an ordinary disruption in school? Because the First Amendment has a higher threshold as what would qualify as a disruption. And I think maybe as we bring back something, discussing what that would look like, I think would be helpful to the policy language and also just to our overall administration, because there's different levels of what the court would consider a disruption versus what we would consider a disruption. So I think that might be helpful. I just want to add that as a recommendation.
That's great. And then just defining instructional time for whom. Is it for the whole school or is it for the individual student? Because I go back to this quote from the opinion, school officials do not possess absolute authority over their students. In the absence of a specific showing of constitutionally valid reason to regulate their speech, students are entitled to freedom of expression of their views. And so this, to me, seems, well, I don't know. I have a question of how that fits with instructional time and how that's defined. And then I'm, still waiting on the who's allowed on campus. Is the media allowed on campus? When are they allowed on campus? Is it when we invite them or anytime there's something newsworthy going on? And what is our